Hi, I'm Dr. Zac Cartun, and today I want to talk about 5 of the most popular over-the-counter insoles that we get asked about every day in our clinic. Those 5 insoles are Dr. Scholl's standard all-day comfort insoles, Fulton's insoles, the famous cork ones, Superfeet Hike, which, believe it or not, we hear more for all-day comfort than we do some of the other versions that may sound a little bit more representative, Spenco's cross trainers for standing all day, and then finally Treadlab's Ramble insoles. So what I'm going to do is unbox 4 of them. I already have tested these Dr. Scholl's before, but I think most people are familiar and don't need to see unboxing of these. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how they perform for standing all day, if you're dealing with foot fatigue or soreness after long shifts, what each one is maybe best at if you have subtle variations in your foot pain or physiology, and just an overall review of how they compare to each other. So let's start with the bread and butter, the one we've all heard of, Dr. Scholl's. So Dr. Scholl's are easily the cheapest among these options. I picked them up from my local CVS. And right out of the box, you notice a couple things. One, there's clearly 3 materials. There's a foam that runs from heel to toe, just this blue material. There's a rubber cushion on the bottom, and then there's a thin piece of plastic which serves as the arch support. Overall, it's exactly what I'd expect out of the box. Nothing fancy, but it is soft, and if you're dealing with foot fatigue or minor aches and pains, it does look like off the bat it may be able to provide some relief. A couple things I'd like to talk about, that is the arch height. So I have my trusty ruler right here, and the arch height at its top comes to about 1.5 centimeters. So already that's okay. 1.5 centimeters is going to be good for people who are just looking for a little bit of arch support. The problem is that the arch support is mainly given by this piece of foam, and I don't know if it comes across completely on camera, but just pushing down with my thumbs is able to collapse a lot of that foam. That said, still an okay option, especially for a starter insole, just to see if you want to get used to how it feels in your shoe, the process of taking it in and out. Not a bad first place to look. A couple other measurements I want to do, which is the foam thickness in the forefoot, and I don't want my trusty ball to roll off the table. Good. In the forefoot, it comes to 3.8 millimeters, so that's not bad, around 4 millimeters of foam. That's going to provide some cushioning, especially in the short term. And then the heel cup, instead of measuring it, I just want to show you that it's more performative, or it's more for the look than it is actually providing any function. You're able to just easily flatten it with your fingers, meaning that this heel cup isn't really going to provide that much ankle stability. So if that's something you're looking for, just something to keep in mind when you're looking at orthotics or insoles over the counter. And then finally, I like to do a drop test where I drop a ball on top of an orthotic and we see how high it bounces. So it's going to be a little bit loud, but this is what it looks like if I drop it from about, let's see, is that about 6 inches? Okay, 6 inches. This is what it looks like on a completely bouncy wooden table. Flat. And if I do it on the insole, it's about the same thing. It comes up just a little bit. You're not going to get a lot of energy return from something this low quality over the counter, but it is better than just a solid piece of wood that you would be walking on. So there is benefit, maybe not too much. For all day comfort, I think it's a worthy first option if you don't want to spend a lot of money, or if you don't want to be shopping online. You can get these at any Walgreens, any CVS, any local pharmacy. All right. One other thing I like to consider, I don't want my ball to roll off the table, is the flexibility and rigidity of these insoles. So there is a plastic component here that provides some rigidity. You can't exactly bend this easily over itself, whereas the foam in the forefoot is really bendable. And one thing that I like is it's able to at least support, the foam is able to support its own weight against gravity. Now, if I hold it from the other end, you'll see it can't really do it from the forefoot side, but a lot of insoles can't even do it from this direction. So that's something, and it gives you a little bit of confidence in the quality of the foam. Now, again, when I talk about the arch support, this piece of plastic here, that's kind of what Dr. Scholl's is banking on in terms of their marketing, that, hey, this is going to be a really strong arch support that you can get for a reasonable price. And unfortunately, this piece of plastic is very thin and is not going to provide long-lasting support or relief. And I'm going to try my best to see if I can take it off on camera. It's a little bit finicky. Yeah, here we go. It's coming. It's coming. All right. So this piece of plastic here, you can see, is actually very, very thin. It's about 1 or 2 millimeters from the profile. And even though it looks like it's going to be providing a lot of arch support on the bottom, what it's really doing is just providing a little bit more protection against the flexion of the foot. It's not actually going to be pushing up on your arch. That's going to be providing that longitudinal arch in your foot. So just another thing to keep in mind when you're getting something over the counter. And finally, I have my shore hardness measurer. This measures basically how hard or soft the orthotic is. I always do a measurement at the heel, and it is, if I push down as hard as I can, against its own weight, 12.5 shore hardness. So 12.5, again, that's quite soft. You can look at your average scale. We're talking something softer than the rubber end of an eraser on a pencil. So it's not going to be that structurally hard against your foot. All right, that's my review of Dr. Scholl's. Let's move on to something more on the higher end. These are walk Fultons. So walk Fultons, right out of the box, they're famous for their cork structural support that goes from heel to forefoot. I do like this. A lot of orthotics, the strength of the material is really just focused around the arch. This goes all the way the length of the insole. That's very nice. Let's look at the height of the arch. The Dr. Scholl's was about 1.5 centimeters, and this is 1.5 centimeters. So you're getting the same kind of generic arch lift that over-the-counter insoles are willing to provide without being, too extreme for people that aren't used to a more intrusive fit. Isn't exactly the right word, but a fit that is more going to make a difference if your arch is flattening. So this is going to be a little bit sturdier than the Dr. Scholl's. The cork is definitely a much more premium material than the foam in the previous. And there's 3 layers here. There's a kind of fabric top cover. There's a middle foam layer that is about, I don't want that to fall. The middle foam layer is 3 millimeters as opposed to the 4 millimeters in the Dr. Scholl. And then, of course, you have this cork bottom. So a lot of people talk about the cork as being a proxy for a custom orthotic. And that's true. When you wear these over time, your foot is going to form into the cork. And if your foot is structurally in, good shape, it's well aligned, that's a great thing because the cork is going to preserve whatever structure your foot is already in. I caution people with severe foot pain or foot flat-footedness, high arches, ankles that invert or evert, to when they wear cork, because the problem is whatever sort of issues you have in your foot are going to get baked into that orthotic. So the classic example is if you have ankle supination, meaning your ankles roll in a lot, that rolling in is going to push more towards the medial inside of the cork. And over time, there's going to be a depression on the inside, which is going to further the ankle supination. So it kind of has this cascading effect that you need to consider when you're trying walk Fulton insoles. That said, they do feel well made. I like the 3 layers. I guess the one quality note is there is a little bit of overlap of the foam around the cork on the side. It's not exactly well grinded, and for the $60 price range, that's a little disappointing. There's definitely some roughage around the sides. It's not going to make any difference in how they function, but just something to consider when you're buying. So if I do my trusty ball test, about 6 inches, it's about the same as the Dr. Scholl's. You're not getting any unusual energy returned here. They also don't have any special heel cushioning support. So if you're dealing with plantar fasciitis, if you have calcaneal pain, that is pain on the heel bone, this may not be the perfect insole for you. The heel support might, the arch support may distribute pressure away from the heel, which would be good. But for standing all day, you typically want to have a little bit more support on the heel than your, average orthotic or insole. So something to keep in mind if standing all day is really your goal. Or I should say standing all day pain-free. So that's my roundup of Walk Fulton. Let's do the typical measures. All right, so the entire width of the forefoot is about 5.5 millimeters, a bit thicker than Dr. Scholl's, and that highlights that there's this cork and foam layer that's going to provide cushioning. And the heel cup on the Walk Fulton is actually a real heel cup. It doesn't compress when I push against it, and that means that it's actually going to provide a little bit of ankle stability when you're wearing them, which is actually very important for people that are not just standing all day, but moving all day. I'm thinking of people who are working on maybe a factory floor, a manager that have to walk around to a lot of different areas. This might be a little bit better than something that is just a little bit more flaccid, again, for the heel. The one other thing is the flexibility of the insole. This clearly holds up well against gravity in both directions. It doesn't bend too much in any direction. There's a lot of internal structural stability. I like that. So overall, definitely the price increase from Dr. Scholl's to Walk Fulton's makes sense. These are pretty good for standing all day. Just caution against people who already have kind of a structural problem with their foot. And if they're having pain in the heel, this isn't going to provide a lot of heel pain relief if you're standing all day. All right, so let me move on to the next one. I'm going to leave my ball in here because it is just bouncing and rolling around too much. This is one of the most popular insoles we hear about for standing all day. That is Superfeet Hike support. So let's take them out of the box and see what they look like. So yeah, Superfeet comes with an amazing marketing team, and they have some of the coolest and most fun designs of their orthotics. These are really, really well made. I can tell right off the bat. The finishing around the edges is really perfect. There's no kind of roughage anywhere, and it exactly lines up throughout. There's clearly three materials. There's a green piece of foam that goes across from heel to toe, and then there's an orange piece of foam underneath that also goes from heel to toe, whereas on the rear foot, there's an plastic arch support. Like the Dr. Scholl's, this plastic arch support looks like it's providing kind of structural support that pushes up against the arch of the foot, the way you can kind of see that there's a arch to this insole. However, like the Dr. Scholl's, this piece of black plastic is actually very thin, just like this. If I were to rip it off, which is a little bit harder on these Superfeet, which I've tried before, so I'm not going to do it on camera, you would see that this piece of black plastic is actually about 1 or 2 millimeters wide, just like the Dr. Scholl's, and it's not actually the main proponent of the arch support in this orthotic. Instead, it's the foam, the 2 layers of green and orange foam that run from heel to toe that are kind of built up in the middle. And as an example, if you want to see how strong the arch support is, just with my hand, I'm able to bend it kind of flat, which shows that if I can do it with my hand, a full body weight is going to flatten these insoles no problem. That said, there is additional heel cushioning right here. They actually give you a little bit of a chance to feel it in the heel here, and that is, again, critical for standing all day. When you're standing, you're alternating your weight between the forefoot and the heel of your feet. You kind of do a rocking motion, and people tend to spend more of that time rocking on the heel portion than on the forefoot. That's why I like to see just a little bit of cushioning if you're going to be standing all day, if you need something for all day durability. And then let's do our standard measurements. So the forefoot, 6 millimeters, so this has the thickest overall foam component throughout, which again kind of lends to what it's particularly good for. And the heel cup here is actually pretty strong. So this is another actually functional heel cup, not something that just looks like it might provide ankle stability but goes flat over time. This really will provide ankle stability. So far I'm liking these the most. They have a little bit of its own It has its own internal structure, so meaning that your foot isn't going to change the shape of the insole like it will with the Fulton cork over time. This will maintain its shape, which I like. That's really good if you already have some kind of structural problem. Flat feet, ankle inversion, eversion, bunions, and really just any sort of malalignment in the foot. They're not going to bake into your Superfeet orthotics. I really like that. Let's look at the arch height. So this has one of the highest top points of its arch, around 2.2 centimeters. So that's also pretty nice. I like the fact that it's going to be providing arch support, which distributes pressure away from the heel and forefoot when you're doing that rocking motion while you're standing. So this is actually so far the best option that I've seen. And finally, let's do our ball test. So that clearly had the highest bounce and energy return, and I think it goes to show a little bit why you're going to get the best bang for your buck so far with the Superfeet or Insoles, sorry, orthotics insoles, kind of interchangeable. Oh, and I forgot to do my shore hardness testing on both this and the Fulton, so I'll do them together. Yeah, this is really low. 10, so quite soft, and I think that's going to really translate into a very comfortable insole when you wear them right out of the bat. And these Fultons are 15, so this is the hardest one so far. It is a sign of being a high material, a good material, premium quality, a good insole really for the price. It's just when you're making a very hard insole in a non-custom way, you run the risk of parts digging in or feeling uncomfortable in the foot if it's not really fine-tuned for how your foot is shaped. So just something to keep in mind. If you already have Fultons, I'd say they're definitely worth a try. But if you're buying your first kind of premium, all-day comfort, over-the-counter insole, something to keep in mind. All right, so that concludes my Superfeet discussion. So now a little bit less known insole. This is Spenco. Spenco makes high quality over-the-counter insoles. They're very well known in the podiatric and physical therapy industry. Not as well known among the public. They don't have as big of a marketing budget. These are the Cross Trainers Cushion series. So basically another word for useful for a lot of purposes, mostly if you're going to be standing and all day. So right off the bat, these are the lightest and softest insoles of any of the ones I've held so far. Soft, not just in terms of the cushioning that it provides, but also there's no firm plastic anywhere. So these are not going to be providing kind of a strong arch support throughout. I mean, just looking at them, it's really flat. We can measure the arch height. This is 1 centimeter, maybe even a little bit less. That means if you're dealing with flat feet, if you're dealing with really any painful pressure points throughout, it's not going to be distributed as well as it is in the other insoles. However, there is really thick foam. So this is a 3-piecer. Again, we have a thick piece of black foam throughout, a secondary smaller piece of black foam on the forefoot, and then this rubberized yellow foam rubberized yellow foam that goes across the heel and midfoot. Interestingly, they have this black component here that looks like an additional piece of cushioning. It's really just a lining to this yellow foam. It's not a separate thing. Feeling the heel, there's a huge heel cushion, which does lend to all-day comfort. It is going to be good if you're dealing with calcaneal pain. But again, because there's not a lot of arch support, the best way to dissipate pressure on the heel is not having a cushion under the heel, but rather putting more pressure on other parts of the foot to take weight off altogether. That said, let's look at the actual thickness of the cushion. 6 millimeters, so that's about the same as the Superfeet. Not bad, and it actually has quite a nice feel and design to it, so I'm pretty impressed so far. Let's do the ball test. It was about 6 inches. So that had 3 bounces. These are going to give you the highest energy return. I'm not surprised because the heel or the cushioning here is really, really high material. I'm very impressed. It feels like you want to step on it. But I'd like to remind you that when there's a lot of cushioning on an insole that feels good to your hands, your feet don't have that same kind of tactile dexterity that your hands do. And particularly when your entire body weight is going to be compressing the insole, a lot of times the cushion is more of a marketing gimmick than an actual support feature. And I would just consider this across all the insoles. Whatever cushioning is promised, really the more important part is how weight will be distributed around the insole. Because this is really flat, it's not providing a lot of arch support anywhere. There's no kind of bumps or modulations that are going to transfer weight around. You're really just going to be standing on something really flat, and over time the cushion will compress. So far, these are probably closer to the Dr. Scholl's, maybe a high-end version of Dr. Scholl's when it comes to comfort. If you're dealing with an acute injury or acute pain, these will be good. But I would imagine that after a couple weeks or months of use, whatever cushioning benefit you feel will eventually get compressed, and you'll be looking for at least another pair or something that offers more support altogether. All right, one more to discuss, and that is TreadLab's Ramble insole. So TreadLabs are actually gaining a lot of traction. I'm hoping it doesn't say traction in here, and that will be a really bad pun. No, it doesn't. Okay, TreadLabs are getting a lot of traction currently. I see ads for them on Instagram all the time, and they're also kind of in a higher price range, around $60. These are specifically made for high arches. So let's evaluate how they function for people with higher arches. And I guess right off the bat, I can tell there is quite a bit of arch height here, around 2.5 centimeters. So that puts it at the top range of arch support. And it's really buffered or supported by a very thick piece of plastic on the bottom. This piece of plastic on TreadLabs is not like this Dr. Scholl's that is about 1 millimeter or 2 thick. This has real width to it, and you can't bend it at all. It's made out of 2 components, the TreadLabs insole. It goes foam from heel to toe, and then it has this additional plastic piece that's providing midfoot and heel support. Now, what is a little disconcerting about this insole is it's already kind of falling apart or not connected well where the plastic meets the midfoot at the foam area. And if I pull just a little bit, it rips apart, and you can see that it's just a plastic piece with Velcro attachments onto the insole. This isn't intrinsically a problem, especially if you're just going to be using these to stand. But I imagine if you're walking or starting to do a little bit of moderate activity, going to the gym, running, playing sports, you would run the risk of these insoles sliding around and ripping off and ripping apart. So a little disappointing given the price point for these insoles. That said, I really, really am impressed by this high arch heel. This is really robust. I can't move it with my hands, and I would imagine this is the only one out of all of these that's providing real lasting arch support. So these are great if you're dealing with issues that are related to your arch flattening, related to your arch being stuck in a really high position where it needs that support. And this high arch does its own job of cushioning the heel and forefoot by raising the foot, putting pressure under here, and then taking pressure off the heel and forefoot area. Let's do a couple more measurements. Let's measure the foam in the forefoot. Around 5 millimeters. That puts it in the middle top range in terms of foam thickness. And there's a heel cup here that is a semi-functional heel cup. What do I mean by that? Well, because the foam exceeds the height of the of the plastic heel, a lot of the height of this heel cup is actually for show, and you can flatten it over the plastic. That said, there still is a little bit of plastic heel cup built into the stable plastic piece here, which will provide that ankle stability if you're walking around the floor and need that a little bit additional piece of support throughout the day. Let's do our ball test. You can see not much bounce, very, very little energy return. That's okay. The benefit of these insoles is less the strength of the foam. The foam here is actually quite low quality compared to, let's say, the Spenco insoles. The real benefit of these insoles is going to be the arch. So let me round up kind of my final thoughts about all of these insoles and maybe be able to guide you if you're looking for your first pair of over-the-counter insoles that is or is not Dr. Scholl's. So let's get all of these out. already have my Superfeet out. All right, we got Tread Labs, Walk Fulton. Now we just need the Spencos. All right. So here are the 5 orthotics. Once again, Dr. Scholl's, kind of your all-day comfort insoles. Superfeet Hike, still good and really popular for people who are standing around. Standing around makes people sound lazy. I don't mean that. I just mean that are standing on their feet, not able to move a lot all day. Walk Fulton insoles. Tread Labs specifically for high arches, and then finally Spenco's cross trainers. So when I think about the best and worst, it's not really the right way to think about insoles. Instead, you should be thinking about what's the best and worst insole for a particular purpose. Now today we're talking about standing all day. Standing all day also needs to be considered in the context of what is wrong or what is the pain that you're feeling in your foot. So let's start with the most common. If you're having kind of that dull, achy pain that comes on later in the day, what you really are going to be benefiting from is something that provides arch support, that is distributing pressure away from the heel and forefoot, preventing that rocking motion that is what's contributing to that fatigue and ache that you're experiencing all day. For that arch support, 2 of these insoles really stand above each other, the Superfeet Hike and the Tread Labs. I'm really impressed with the structure of the arch support. They really are going to withstand a lot of that weight and pressure that your body is putting on your feet all day, and they're going to do a good job distributing weight away. Because there's a little bit of a kind of manufacturing glitch with the Tread Labs, and the fact that the energy return from the ball test was the best for Superfeet Hike, these get my winners for people with dull, achy feet at the end of the day that are standing all day and want an over-the-counter insole to provide the best support. Now there's a second person out there, and those are the people with really bad heel pain that are maybe suffering from plantar fasciitis and are mostly experiencing pain, maybe even early, right when they get out of bed. Those people are going to want heel cushioning first and foremost. And the heel cushioning winner are the Spenco cross trainers. The heel cushion here is really thick, about 1 millimeter. It doesn't even come close, a centimeter, maybe even more. I should actually measure it. The heel cushion really is the full height of the insole. 2 centimeters, shows how bad I am at measuring by eyeball. None of them even come close. The rest have about the same depth and thickness of the heel cushion. These are going to provide the most immediate pain support for people whose standing all day pain is really a consequence of heel pain. And then finally, Walk Fultons do impress me for their unique construction. The fact that they have a cork is really interesting, and for people who already have kind of functionally normal feet, there's not a lot of ankle instability, these might be a good choice to just reinforce that natural positive body posture. But if you're suffering from some sort of anatomical mispositioning, these probably aren't the way to go. And then finally, Dr. Scholl's. These really came in last in every category, but they are the cheapest, and if you're willing to try them, if they do provide you that benefit, you did save money. Just in my experience, I think I can count on one hand to the number of people whose pain has truly been alleviated with Dr. Scholl's. So what ends up happening is people buy these insoles, they feel good for a couple days, then their pain comes back and they're just back to square one and they have to buy something more expensive anyway. Might as well buy that right thing right off the bat. So this concludes my all-day insole review. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below and we'll be happy to address them. Thank you so much.